I'll call to order the Tuesday, September 3rd Fiscal Committee meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of you here at Carnegie Town Hall and those that are watching us on CityLink or on SiouxFalls.org. We'll start out with the approval of the meeting minutes from Tuesday, July 2nd. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have one presentation today, and that is by Brent O'Neill from Community Development Manager on the TIF 17. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And my screen shows a bunch of yellow lines, so hopefully that's not showing on yours. You're clear? All right. Well, yeah, thanks for the invitation. Brent O'Neill with Community Development. Wanted to come here and give a quick update on where we stand with TIF 17. This was a request from the Fiscal Committee, so we wanted to come in and give just a quick highlight of a few points and then answer any questions if you have them. As you recall, it's about a year ago. I think it was October of 2012 that the City Council approved Tax Increment District number 17. That was a project that encompassed a 30-acre site on an undeveloped property by Grange Avenue in Minnesota, Grange Avenue and 41st Street. It was the former site of the Williams Pipeline. It has been virtually vacant and underdeveloped for 20 plus years. And we did have a couple projects come forward as an impetus to develop this property, but they did request tax increment financing to move that project forward. Just as a point of note, these slides, I pulled 3 of them directly from our presentation just to kind of reiterate the same points that were made then, but then we do have a 4th slide to kind of talk about where we are today. At that time, what we were projecting, the property was, again, underdeveloped, had a taxable value of just under $1 million. That was resulting in little tax to the county, school, the city, very little. What we were working with on projects would have a taxable value of $30+ million. That would take us from, a handful of tax dollars to a potential of $550,000 in long-term revenue for the various government entities. As we put the plan together, it did constitute 2 different projects. One was a residential project of a 4-plex, several hundred unit complex. The other was the Costco site that is about ready to open. The main issue with the site being a former pipeline and storage facility for petroleum products. There was some leakage several years ago, some preliminary mitigation, but there was just a lot of hesitancy on anyone's part to develop this site, and that's I think why it took so long to even get to this point of parties being interested. But as we were putting our discussions together, we were looking at a $50 million investment potentially, but some fear on the people putting that project together, that there was kind of an open door or a bit of a panacea of potential environmental concerns. Through the various work that engineering firms and geotechnical firms had done, the scope of what environmental conditions might be ranged from a low end to a high end, and I think the high end number scared a lot of people. You're in excess of $5 million, and that $5 million didn't even come with a kind of a hard guarantee from any of the engineers that might be a cap. So as we were talking to these guys, they were looking for some sort of safety net to make sure that we could get the site cleaned, that development could happen, but that there wouldn't be a catastrophic bill waiting for them, due to a super high environmental remediation process. As we put the TIF together then, one of the things we negotiated with both developers, again the Costco people and the Dunhams, were a cost share, something that we've never done before, and the share had a couple different purposes, but the real overriding purpose was for all parties to have skin in the game. We wanted people to make diligent decisions about how we were handling these environmental things, but also recognizing that those folks really had a lot more to gain or lose by being active partners, and we think this approach really helped us balance the need to have this public assistance, but also request the developers to contribute and drive those costs down as much as possible. As we originally projected, we were looking at about a 10 to 15 year payback on this TIF potentially, and that is, relatively speaking, one of the lower ends of one we've done. As you'll see on our next slide, we do expect that to come in lower as the projects are starting to come to fruition, and we're finding out exactly what's in the ground. Environmental situations are unfortunate in that you can do a best guess, but it's oftentimes not until you're turning the soil over that you get a full indication of what is needed and what needs to be done. That leads us to where we are today, and this is really the status update that we wanted to give you before we open it up for questions. Costco is turning the corner towards the finish line on their project. They have had a very aggressive schedule from the start, and they're maintaining that. So October 3rd is the day that they want to do an opening. I don't believe the project will be completed in its entirety, landscaping, those types of things, but they will be able to open the doors October 3rd. The apartment project still is working to get that project off the ground soon. But as we were working through the summer, and as Costco was working through the summer and our communications with them, it has turned out that environmental conditions were better than expected, which is a great thing for a lot of reasons. But as it relates to the TIF, it's important because we expect as the projections come in and become reality that our estimates of those costs are likely going to be lower than what we had put in the TIF plan. And again, this TIF was set up in such a way that only those costs up to a certain amount shared 15% and 85% will be reimbursed. So this only lowers the impact necessary from the TIF, and ultimately will hopefully shorten that time frame from 10 years to potentially under 10 years. In the coming months, we'll work with Costco probably towards the end of the year as they start to do their final auditing, their final budgeting. They're going to submit their final cost to us. We're going to do a thorough review of those to end up certifying those costs, and at whatever time we certify those costs, that's when we know the final actual TIF amount for the Costco project and can begin the reimbursement process. So that'll come in the next couple months. On the other project, the apartment project, that will be really at the time that they get their environmental work done and probably get their first building up. So that's probably going to be into next year before we look at that one. We did set this TIF up in two halves, so we have a specific agreement with Costco and a specific agreement with that apartment project, so we can move forward now this fall on the Costco part of that piece. With that, we wanted to answer any questions you have on this update.
Councilor Entenmann.
My question you did answer, and I'd like to thank you, and that was where are we with the remediation of the environmental hazards that might possibly exist there. And your statement that it looks like we got lucky on this one and it's not going to be as bad as what we thought sounds pretty good.
Yeah, no, everything looks good so far. Well, I shouldn't say good because there were some issues, but certainly
promising.
Well ahead of the curve that we.
You bet. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're
good.
welcome.
Councilor Karski.
Brent, I appreciate the update on this, and if you have updates on future TIFs or other TIFs that have been approved, this is great information. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
What is the timeline for the second half of this TIF with the apartment complex? How much time do they have to complete that before the TIF expires?
Yeah, that's kind of a twofold way that we look at the time frame they have. They were intending on starting this summer, and they're doing some things at Dunham Company to restructure a little bit. So we hope that that's still coming yet this fall, but possibly this spring if we don't get to it this fall. But there are two things we'd be looking at on the time frame. One, we have a statutory limit of 5 years from the day a TIF district's created to the time that a project can still use TIF dollars to cover costs. So in that sense, we have 4 years left roughly since we're a year into the TIF. But the other, and it's something that the city structures into all of its TIFs, is a bit of a performance measurement, and I'd have to double check what our exact date is, but there's a certain amount of a time that a project has to get going, and then a commencement date, and then we have the ability to negotiate through them, but it's not an open-ended, take forever sort of thing.
And of the 30 acres, how much is Costco and how much is the apartment? Do we know? Is it pretty evenly split?
It's roughly a split. I want to say that Costco is about 17, so it would be just a little bit less than half, and for the Dunham side, so 17, 13.
Okay.
Other questions? Councilor Jameson.
Brent, thanks for coming in. We had brought this up last time the fiscal committee met to review the Costco TIF because we had learned in the media that Don Dunham had sold some of the land, half the land, for some amount. And I can't remember. I don't have the amount, but I think it's do you remember what the amount was?
To $4 million.
Sold it for $4 million. He had 30 acres, and I guess what was first off, let's ease a little tension here. I'm not trying to recall this TIF. Mm-hmm. All I'm wanting to do is learn from it because it was very unusual that we heard or learned about a sale of land that was involved. Normally, it's a developer developing his own buildings and and moves on. But this, when Dunham bought it for $2.1 million, 30 acres, comes in and requests the TIF in order to get it developed, gets the TIF for $5 million, sells half of the land for quite some profit, and it becomes pretty obvious that maybe perhaps the TIF wasn't necessary. And so all I wanted to do with this junction was to figure out what could we do better in the beginning up front to understand the real necessity of the TIF going into the deal. I know it's unusual that we heard about this sale, and I don't even maybe understand who owns the TIF today, if Dunham still has it or if it's with Costco.
Sure, I can answer that too.
That's a question, but is it unusual for us to learn about the sale price? Has that happened in the past? Do we ever have an incident that we can refer to?
This I think is the first one that I can recall where the sale price was, or the sale was all part of the intricacy of the total deal. I mean, you're going to have other projects where land is sold a couple years ahead of time, but this is, I think, kind of an unusual one in that sense, where in the course of a year, because we really first started talking about this probably about a year before we came to the council, and we're talking through a lot of the details, and I would say, yeah, it is a bit unusual where all the pieces that maybe moving parts kind of came together at the same time. What's a little bit interesting is just a little bit of the background on that. We were actually talking with Mr. Dunham about a separate project there of a year ahead of time, and I'll try to sequence this a little bit, but approximately October of 2011, he would have approached us. We talked for a couple months about that project. By December and January, that project had fallen through. By spring of that year, he had come back at about the same time we were talking to Costco and saying, I think I have a deal. Great. Costco says, we have a deal, great. Well, as they started diving more and more into this environmental, Costco got more and more nervous. At that point, Costco had a purchase agreement in place and a budget that they needed to keep, and they approached the city, saying, hey, we've got a $30 million investment here. We want to keep it 30. We don't want to have a $3 or a $5 million overrun on our budget. And asked us, what, if anything, we could do. And, we had several discussions that included us, that included the Dunhams, that included Costco, and some others, really trying to massage, everything the best we can. And I do want to say, that on this particular one, we really wanted to use TIF as a last resort. We wanted to, push things around, see what Costco could do, see what Dunham could do, pushing things to kind of a last resort. And ultimately, I think what we brought forward was kind of a conservative TIF, in that we did bring TIF forward, but we did the cost share, we did the cap, we were very specific in what it could be used for, probably as specific as we've ever been. I think in other TIF plans, we've been specific in that we've put, broad categories. But this listed item for item, what they could qualify for. So we were very specific. It was extremely limited to just environmental. So as we were, going through the process, those are some things we worked at. But one other thing I want to point out on the sum of the project is it really took both the Dunham project and the Costco project coming together to make this work in the grand scheme of things. The sale price, if you will, of of the Costco land is really staying in the project, and it's being used to cover a shortfall on the Dunham side of that project, if that makes sense.
Well, you could look at it a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
If you were, you could almost consider that the other 15 acres that they have, they got free. You could look at it a lot of different ways, and I don't want to get into that kind of a discussion. Really, it's really a couple things I'm hearing is the mitigation efforts are minimal. And in essence, the 4.9 that's there, you are, what I'm hearing you say is going to be far less used.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I could be the best one to say that the project would have gone on without the TIF or not. That's ultimately the question that we put into call if we're going to do a TIF or not is will it or won't it? And I don't want to go there. All I know is that we learned a lot more in this transaction than we ever had before, and I wanted to take this opportunity to digest it. And in fact, even I know you're working on some revisions, and I heard a presentation some time ago.
Yes.
What I was looking for, if I could add, is a math equation, a math worksheet, if you want to call it something else, whatever, but a worksheet that shows, because I think you have to disclose who owns the land, and if you know how much they purchased it for, I mean, I think we could do a better job of going through the math is what I'm getting at. The needs, whether there should or shouldn't be use of a TIF, we can all digest and kind of figure out that, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But the math equation, I think, is what's missing from your presentations to us. But I just want to make sure we don't lose this information that we captured in a unique way to do a better job in the future of creating TIFs. That's what I'm really after.
Well, and thank you for saying that, because that's our goal as well, and certainly the process that we're working on. We want to make that cleaner, better, more informative, and probably the one thing that I really think is going to be the most beneficial is that we want to take it forward to the council twice. To not put that sort of burden on the council in a single meeting. To be able to ask those questions, have a little time to digest it, come back a following week. And we're also doing that at the Planning Commission. So I think that's one of the things that we really hope comes out of our refinement is that the council has more opportunity and more time and more comfort in making these decisions.
Brent, there hasn't been any environmental work done yet for the apartment complex, or has there been?
There has been some minimal work, and that's actually a relationship that the property owners had where there's some cross impacts of the two sites with like the water detention pond and potential pollutants in there. So Costco did do a little bit of work with Dunham Company on the Dunham Company side.
But with the way I remember the project, there's going to be underground garages. Is that the case, or am I thinking of a different? I would think they're not going to be. I thought that there were, because I thought the greater cost, the environmental cost, was for the apartment complex.
The split ended up being about, of the $5 million potentially in mitigation needed, the apartment project was about 3, the Costco was about 2 in our estimates. I'd have to double check on the parking on that. I know one of the issues was, per EPA standards, you have to have a cleaner site, quote unquote cleaner site for residential, so that might be a little bit where that disparity comes in as well.
Okay.
I'll look anything up though you need
All
me
right.
to.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
One comment Councilor Jameson said that I just wanted to answer was how or who owns the TIF, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
That'll end up being 2 separate developer agreements, one for the Costco and one for the apartment project. So the one with Costco is directly with Costco as the landowner.
Okay, thank you.
Director Smith.
Yes, good afternoon. I just wanted to add 1 or 2 things. One thing, when we do bring the new ordinance or the proposed ordinance forward, and we think we're going to do that this month yet, one of the items you'll see as a change to the process, and we feel is an improvement, is one that Councilor Jameson was just touching on with, we have we've been in talks with a firm that we believe can provide the type of specific expertise we need to help us review TIFs going forward. So again, our goal is to just continue to be better with that. I think it's been good. I want to say that I think it's been good. We do look at all the numbers and we do question and scrutinize and those things. But again, we're undertaking a comprehensive effort to put a new ordinance in place that will change a lot of things with TIF, and one of them is to have a firm assist us with reviewing. So when a project submits their TIF request and what they're requesting for TIF eligible expenses and the different expenses associated with a project, they will be an independent third party outside of our office that we will work with to review. So they'll have that kind of construction and architect and cost expertise. So we feel that will help us. We're already doing some of that and have historically on the legal side of things with the TIF statutes and the developer agreement, those things with a private law firm. We always use a private law firm to assist us with this. But we're going to bring this into the fold as well. So that's something that we'll be touching on more in September. So I think that'll be good. Then just the last thing I did want to say is, we have engaged in a number of TIFs or been a part of a number of TIFs in the last 3 years. And honestly, what we knew going into this TIF and what we know now, I believe this is truly one of the TIFs that I feel best about, to be very honest with you. And we welcome the opportunity to come and talk about these because I know you're not our only audience here. We have an audience at home as well. And our biggest challenge with TIF, I think, is it is complex. It's not something people engage in on a regular basis, and there are a lot of assumptions or misunderstandings. But I would go as far as to say this, knowing everything we know even now with this project, and we knew a lot going into it, but I would absolutely do this TIF again and structure it exactly the way we did. And something that Brent touched on that I don't think should be lost is never before with the previous TIFs had we done a cost share with the developer, the private entity. It had always been 100% of those TIF eligible expenses would be reimbursed from the TIF to the private entity. In this case, we did two things. One, we did an 85-15 cost share that we agreed to, so they've got to pay 15% of any expenses that they put into the project and then request for reimbursement. That is a nice accountability tool to keep them from putting all kinds of stuff into the project and then simply seeking reimbursement. So I'm really glad we did that. The other is we restricted this to environmental only, not the other typical public improvements that we would agree to reimburse through TIF, like sidewalks, streets, curb gutter, utilities, those types of things. And so at the end of the day, we knew a lot of those numbers and what they were likely to be, but this was always intended to be a safety net because they looked at this, Dunham and Costco and those folks, they looked at this and said, on the surface, this could be a good deal, and we want to do this, but we have to have some kind of safety net in place for the environmental because the engineers that Brent touched on, geotech and those types, they basically said, look, this could be anywhere from several $100,000 to north of $5 million. And if it went north of $5 million, Dunham and this group would get upside down quickly. And so that's really where the conversation was at that point. It was, we want to do this project on their end. We wanted them to do it because of the private investment and Costco and so forth. And it was truly put in place as a safety net, and very unique compared to most of the TIFs that we had done. So I think it's going to end up working out very well for everybody. We think it's early, but preliminary indications from Costco at their project nearing the finish line is that the environmental conditions out there were limited. And so we would expect their request for reimbursement to be limited, and then we'll get into the apartment project. we're making some assumptions at this point that what you find on one side of that piece is what you'll likely find on the other, which makes us very optimistic. But I think we feel by the end of this calendar year, we'll have probably closed the books on the Costco half and be able to certify that portion. So that'll be very telling for the whole TIF, but we think it is going to be limited. And just the last thing I would say, not for your benefit because you know this, but again, those who watch at home or in the audience, you know, since we approved this almost a year ago, I have had a number of people ask me, you know, why did we cut a check for $4.9 million to a giant like Costco or Dunham? And then I see one of the bullet points up here and how that could probably be misconstrued where it said environmental conditions are better than expected. Okay, I don't want anybody to be left with the impression that they ran away with a big check and they don't have to spend. That's not the way it works. The developer and the private entity front all the money to clean the site. So in this case, we went from what was a dirty site on some level to now we have a clean site on half, and hopefully the other half will be clean soon too. They fronted all the money. Now they will request reimbursement from us, and we will review that. We will scrutinize that, use environmental experts inside or outside City Hall, and they know that, and we will then approve or deny what those expenses are, and then we'll be able to tell you that in a few months. So we're anxious for that as well.
Councilor Jameson, did you have another question or comment?
Comment and question. Very good details. That's actually very good. And I look for the other presentations to come. It'll even have even more information,
Yep.
and we'll all become even more familiar with how all of them work. I don't know if you want a 1, 2, or 3 version of a TIF, but this is a lot different than the other TIFs, and
It is.
should be noted somehow. And the other one was you wanted to hire the private firm to review the application. Well, that, I'm assuming lawyers, but is it somebody else?
This would be a group. Actually, I think it's okay to say this. The group that we've been talking to is the firm that we're currently using for the event center, Tegra. So I don't know if Dick Strasberg with Tegra has been in front of the council or not, or he's been referred to. But Dick's firm is somebody, as we've gotten to know him better with the relationship we have on that project, the more it's become apparent, you know, the role he's playing really in the event center project is to scrutinize expenses associated with the construction and design. He's an architect by trade, but he started this firm with others in Minneapolis several years ago. And so we started talking to him and thought, you know what, we think we can benefit from that too. Again, I think Brent does a very good job with these TIFs, and I think we do a good job at the staff level. We reach outside of City Hall when we feel like we need to. But I think it's even better if we can get an independent third party involved, and then that just becomes a small TIF-related cost that we would pass on to the developer.
That's what I was wondering, is where that cost would be recovered. You say it again, where it would be covered?
It would be that TIF, that cost would be
Part of the TIF.
That would be, that's right, and it would be borne by the developer. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you,
Okay.
both Brent and Director Smith.
Thank you.
This is now the portion of the meeting that we have for open discussion. Is there any open discussion? Councilor Jameson.
I think it's fair to discuss the Moore presentation that Councilor Staggers presented. I think what he was after and referring to is the FEMA money that's going to be coming, and his recommendation that it be sent to Moore, Oklahoma. And, you know, our last fiscal committee, we talked about that, the whole process of accepting the money, where would it come, where would it go. And I don't know that it was fully discovered back then, but I think the idea that if the citizens of Sioux Falls don't benefit from the use of that money, I think they might get angry. And, you know, putting it in the reserves is one option, or is the current option. I just wanted us to talk about, or at least think about, the idea of paying back some debt service that we had when we built the levee system. Remember, we borrowed some $20 million, but $10 million went to a bridge, roughly $10 million for the levees, all in hopes that the federal government would give us some back. They haven't. But I thought another way that the citizens of Sioux Falls could benefit from that FEMA relief money is to pay off the debt service that the city took to build those levees in order to essentially appease FEMA, or I think it's the Corps of Engineers. But remember, all those residents are paying that higher flood insurance premium that in order to live there, and some of them can't even develop their land because it's in the floodplain.
So your suggestion would be to pay off the debt service rather than replacing the money that we took out of reserves?
And maybe not completely, but maybe a portion of it. Maybe it's a combination of something that we could all do together, because it is important for us to have those reserves funded appropriately. But if we get over and above our reserve, that 25% threshold, that maybe we consider recommending that it be actually used to pay off some of that debt service. Just an idea, because I think it is very important that the citizens of Sioux Falls benefit from it and the use of that money. And I think shipping it off to Moore, Oklahoma, while it would be a wonderful gift, is probably not an appropriate use of the funds. That's just something I want to talk about. Councilor
Entenmann.
Councilor Jameson, I also agree with you in that respect that while I empathize and sympathize with what happened down in Moore, we also had at the time, it was declared an emergency, our own emergency here, and we did pull money out of reserves in order to offset some of those expenses. And of course, it's not offsetting all the expenses, but we will be receiving a portion of those dollars back. And if I'm not mistaken, there was an application process that went in, and the money is just received back in, and then however we appropriate. But I also don't believe that paying off that debt is going to make it easier for the people to be able to sell their land or not pay the higher insurance, because that all comes about once FEMA gets in and has a chance to reevaluate where we're at, and the maps be rewritten and stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, Director Cotter said that they hope to have that completed next year. There's a few other fixtures that they have to budget for and get done this year along with that. But I think the money was pulled out of reserves, and I do believe going back into reserves is a good place for it, because in the future, the drawdown based on what our needs are going to be from the fire stations that we're building, the staffing of those fire stations and such is going to eat away at that reserve in the future. And I think we are providing the ability to meet our everything that we need as far as the construction of those new facilities and stuff. While I agree with you that I empathize with the people in Moore, and we're very fortunate because I know a lot of people made a lot of contributions in this community to those folks down there for the suffering and the damages that they did incur. So,
I believe that Councilor Rolfing would like to make a comment. Councilor Rolfing.
Rex Rolfing, City Councilor. Just in talking to that, I agree with what you're saying, and I agree with what Jim is saying. I would only remind you that if my mind serves me correctly, in the budget that the mayor presented, in the next 5 years, doing nothing more than what we've got there, we're drawing down to right at that 25% level. And if we took another $9 million or $11 million and did something else with it, that would draw us drastically below that 25% level that we're looking at. Where it's, I agree, Greg, that it would be a great idea, and I'd really like to give it all back if we could, but it's just something that being fiscally responsible, I don't think we're really able to do at this point. So just another reminder, something that hit me as I was sitting in the audience. So thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Same thing, Councilor Rolfing. I guess before I would look at spending any money out of the reserves, I'd want to know, what in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, what is that going to do to that budget reserve? And the other thing with the FEMA maps, or the floodplain, we've got everything built from what I understand, but FEMA can take 2 years to draw the maps up. And we're at their basically timetable to get this done. And if there was a way where we could, if we were to spend this money to do anything to get development moving in these areas, let's get these maps done. Why wait another 2 years for the federal government? Let's pay for that so we can get these people out of the floodplain, save homeowners money on their home insurance, their flood insurance, businesses that are paying literally thousands and thousands of dollars a year for flood insurance that they probably wouldn't need based on the new map, et cetera. So I'd rather see us kind of advance that instead of waiting for it.
Any other comments?
Sure, if I-
Counselor Jamison?
If I could follow up, Dean, I know that Councilor Karski had asked Public Works about that privately funding. Did you ever get an answer from?
I have not gotten back to Mark Cotter on that yet.
Okay.
Yep, we'll have to talk about that.
But I think that's a great discussion to have. If we could do it, Dean's, Councilor Karski is exactly right. It's going to take 2 years for the federal government to do it, and they will take as much time as they can because they're generating revenue every month from those flood insurance premiums.
Do you believe that that's a discussion for fiscal, or do you believe it's a discussion that we should bring forward to the informational?
Well, I think Karski could follow up and let us know how it. Sorry, Councilor Karski.
I think he can too.
Karski.
Okay.
Are you willing to do that?
I will do that, yes.
Okay.
And if I could, remember this whole discussion began because we were going to have all of our reserves replenished. We were going to have gone through a significant ice storm and not have any other services or building projects in our community delayed. We were going to go back to whole, so to speak. We will have gone through this ice storm and not had the loss of, as Councilor Entman mentioned, maybe building a new fire station, building a new park. We will have not suffered any bruise, so to speak, of having gone through this event. And that's why I was only suggesting that we remove some of our debt. And if we have to put some of the things off, but I think it's just a win-win versus.
But we still have that 10% that we're obligated to, that will not be replenished into the,
right, but
the
it won't have any
reserve,
significant
right.
impact on our community is what I guess.
right, right.
I only wanted to bring it up as a discussion. I'm certainly not going to kill the horse here, but I just was reading through the minutes of our last meeting, and that was a hot topic. Councilor Stager's presentation today on Moore kind of set some things in me that I wanted to get across, and that's really
I think
all.
it's a very timely discussion for this group, being the fiscal committee, so thank you. Any other comments or discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Entman.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The meeting is adjourned.